Great. Yes, good evening everyone, and on behalf of the NLA I'd like to welcome you all here tonight on what we think is a vital debate about private rented sector. And it's my privilege to sort of outline, give a bit of background so it'll set us all thinking and stimulate some questions and answers later on. As an organisation, the National Landlords Association have been talking about these issues for a number of years, but want to stretch this now not just to be an industry debate and not just a political debate, but a truly public debate about housing. Traditionally, the UK strategy for housing has been simply to increase home ownership and encourage some social housing for those left over. Yet throughout the country, we can see that a better solution is desperately needed. There isn't an easy answer. What is becoming apparent is a need for a much more multifaceted approach, a proper vision based on modern life and modern needs. Liberal Democrats need to champion that vision, both in coalition government and at local government level. So where does renting within the private sector sit within that vision? Well, far from being a hidden tenure of last resort, many people experience renting in the private sector at some point in their lives, either when they go to university, when they leave home to start their careers, or when they move around the country to take up opportunities. The private rented sector actually only seems small, niche and transient because of our preoccupation with social housing and home ownership. In reality, over 3.4 million people rent in the private rented sector today, and that's possible because there are more than 1 million landlords. This type of tenure has seen a massive growth over the last decade as people struggle with ever-increasing house prices, shrinking mortgage finance, and over 5 million people are currently excluded from social housing. But it's also grown out of the changing needs of modern society. A much more mobile and demanding population have chosen a tenure which is all about choice. According to government figures, 70% of all new households in England are finding their homes in the PRS. Over the last decade, over 1 million additional households have been housed in the private rented sector. So whilst politicians have been thinking about how to tackle the growing housing problem, landlords up and down the country have been busy meeting housing needs. They've been the ones investing right now to provide other people with homes. With 1 in 5 likely to be renting from a private landlord by 2020, these landlords and their tenants need to be recognised as a genuine part of the housing mix. There's indeed a positive case for growth in the PRS. We actually need to wake up to the fact that we need more rented housing. The private rented sector is taking a lot of strain in the housing market at the moment, while other parts of the market are at a standstill. But if we want to ensure the expansion of professionally rented accommodation, we need new ways for people to invest in this type of housing. We need creative thinking. The government's put a lot of faith in the ability of institutional investors to bring in significant quantities of rental accommodation to the market, yet in fact very few homes have been materialised. There's been investment in student accommodation, there's been investment in the top end of the sector, but these are only feeding niche parts of the market. Yet there's actually an appetite for investment in the PRS by ordinary people, building a portfolio as a business or to provide for their pensions. 1 in 5 current landlords tell us they're looking to increase their investments in the next year. So one of the questions we need to address is how we can encourage better investment. Another is obviously, can everybody be a landlord? Well, obviously not. Being a landlord takes more than the ability just to invest in a property. The legal and the regulatory framework are complex and comprehensive. Everything from gas safety checks, energy performance certificates, tenancy deposit protection, those are just some of the fundamental requirements a lettings business must meet. And we acknowledge that at the lowest end of the sector, these responsibilities are either unknown or worse, ignored. In other industries, the culture of the polluter pays informs policy and regulation, yet the PRS is still a sector where there's no differentiation between good or bad, with good landlords over-regulated whilst the rogue landlord slips under the net. It's also important to stop thinking that rent simply equals profit. The reality is that there are significant and increasing costs to providing properties for tenants, and without a sustainable long-term business plan and receipt of rent on time, a landlord can quickly find himself in a financial mess. The NLA's helpline takes over 30,000 calls each year to help our members provide professionally managed homes to people up and down the country. Sadly, many in the landlord community are not yet members of an association which can ensure that they do have the information and advice to do a good job. So finally, if we look to the future, what's the best role for government in all of this? Well, the government's due to publish their housing strategy, and we are looking for the following: a clearer idea of what role we want the PRS to play in the UK's housing mix, how government and critically local authorities are going to focus regulatory powers on the badly managed bottom end of the sector, and lastly, how the government's going to encourage growth in the professionally managed part of the sector.
Thank you.